Some developing news out of Mexico. Today, the Mexican army says they killed a powerful cartel leader.
Mexico burns. Epstein returns. And in the space between those two headlines, people start asking a question nobody in power wants asked out loud. Because on one side, a cartel kingpin dies in the mountains of Jalisco. A man so protected, so deeply buried inside violence and money, that for years he looked untouchable. Then suddenly, he's found, hid in a military operation, killed. And within hours, roads burn across Mexico, cities stall, and the state scrambles to contain the aftershock. Reuters reported that Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum said U.S. intelligence assisted in the operation, which immediately makes this more than a local cartel raid. It becomes a cross-border power event. On the other side, Jeffrey Epstein's shadow is back in the public bloodstream again. New Mexico has reopened investigation around Epstein's ranch after newly released federal material pushed the issue back into motion. And CBS reported on a redacted, DEA-linked memo that referenced alleged illegitimate wire transfers tied to illicit drug and/or prostitution activity. The details remain incomplete, heavily redacted, and public reporting does not establish a direct link to Elь Mencho. But the timing is enough to trigger a different kind of reaction, the kind that starts with suspicion and ends with people believing the visible story is only the surface. And that is where this story gets dangerous. Because once a cartel boss dies in an intelligence-backed raid at the same moment Epstein-related files, probes, and accusations are back in the headlines, the public stops seeing two separate stories. It starts seeing one possible pattern: power tightening itself, cleaning up loose ends, removing men who knew too much, and controlling what becomes public before the wrong person starts talking. There is no confirmed public evidence proving that theory, but that is exactly why it spreads so fast. The missing proof becomes part of the suspicion itself. Because official stories have a weakness, they explain the event. They almost never explain why the timing feels so explosive. The official version of Elь Mencho's death is straightforward enough. Mexican forces, aided by U.S. intelligence, locate him after a lead tied to a romantic partner helps break the security wall around him. A raid begins. He is hit. He dies. Retaliation follows. Reuters reported over 250 roadblocks and arson attacks across 20 states after his death, showing just how quickly the cartel moved to prove the machine was still alive after the man at the top was gone. That alone is a massive story. But when a story is already this big, people start asking whether it is also useful to somebody for reasons that have nothing to do with public safety. And that is where Epstein enters, not as a proven operational partner to Elь Mencho, but as a symbol of a different hidden network. Epstein represents a world of sealed names, redactions, compromat, elite access, and the lingering suspicion that the most important facts are still locked away. The recent Reuters reporting about renewed criminal scrutiny around Zorro Ranch, combined with the CBS reporting about a DEA-linked memo, pushes that feeling back into the open. Not certainty, not proof, but pressure. So now the public sees three words in the same frame: cartel, intelligence, Epstein. And once those three words share oxygen, the question mutates. It stops being, did the military kill a drug lord? It becomes, who else benefits when this man disappears right now? That is the psychological engine of this story. Not hard evidence of one hidden alliance, a collapse of trust so deep that millions of people now instinctively assume the real event happened behind the event. And honestly, that instinct did not come from nowhere. The Epstein story trained people to think in shadows, years of sealed files, years of rumors, years of names whispered but never fully tested in public. Even now, Reuters is reporting new political pressure over how Epstein-related material is being handled, including accusations that powerful names may still be hidden. So when another high-profile figure connected to transnational crime dies in an operation involving intelligence cooperation, people do what modern audiences have learned to do. They ask whether another network is being protected before it can be exposed. That does not make the theory true, but it does make the theory inevitable. And if you want to understand why this theory is so sticky, you have to understand what each man represents. El Mencho represents force, territory, routes, fear, a live criminal machine that can burn highways and lock down movement in hours. Epstein represents access, compromise, elite vulnerability, the possibility that the people who look untouchable are tied together by secrets the public only sees in fragments. Now put those two archetypes in the same week. One story says, intelligence found a kingpin through a human vulnerability and killed him. The other, and that gap, the space between real pieces and unproven conclusion, is exactly where this story lives. Because that gap is where power often survives. Not always through brute force. Sometimes through ambiguity. Sometimes through redaction. Sometimes through timing so precise, it makes coincidence feel staged. That is why people are not just asking whether El Mencho was dangerous as a cartel leader. They are asking whether he was dangerous as a potential source of information. Again, no credible public evidence currently proves he had Epstein-related knowledge, or that Trump or the U.S. government faced a specific threat from him exposing secrets. But the fact that people are now asking that question at scale tells you something important. Public trust is so damaged that the burden of proof has psychologically reversed. For many people, secrecy itself has become evidence. And that may be the most explosive fact in this entire story. Because once secrecy becomes evidence in the public mind, every future operation inherits suspicion automatically. Every raid becomes a possible cleanup. Every redacted file becomes a sign. Every sudden death becomes a question mark. And governments lose the ability to control not just events, but meaning. So what should your audience actually take from this? Take this. A cartel kingpin is dead. That is real. The raid was intelligence-assisted. That is real. Epstein-related scrutiny has intensified again in 2026. That is real. A DEA-linked memo tied to Epstein references alleged illicit drug-related activity, though the public record remains heavily redacted. That is real. What is not publicly established is the grand unified theory that these events are part of one proven cleanup operation. But the reason people believe that theory is itself a major story, because it reveals how little confidence remains in official narratives when violence, intelligence, and secrecy collide at the same time. And that brings us to the final question. Not, did we prove the secret link? We did not. Not, was this definitely a cover-up? Publicly, that is not established. The real question is darker than both. Are these stories actually connected behind closed doors? Or are we now living in a world where the public has seen enough secrecy, enough elite protection, and enough missing names that any major operation automatically feels like part of a larger cleanup? Because if that is true, then the deepest damage is no longer only what happens in raids or sealed files. It is what happens to trust. And once trust dies, every headline comes with a second story attached to it. Not the one officials announce, but the one the public has learned to suspect.